Jason Matthews, my friend. Do I have you?
I'm here if you can hear me.
I can hear you. It's a good thing,
Perfect.
and you can hear me. Happy Halloween, brother. How you been?
Happy Halloween. So the question of the day is, what is your candy of choice?
Oh, that's the question of the day. I'm kind of a basic dude. Just to give me a Reese's peanut butter cup, man. I'll be a happy guy. You can't go wrong there.
No, but I will throw a Jolly Rancher back at anybody who gives it to me.
Jolly Rancher is the thing that upsets you?
That and candy corn and Tootsie Rolls. Those are three things I don't like.
Tootsie Rolls? I mean, look, if you would have done circus peanuts and candy corn, everybody would have said, yeah, obviously. There's room for debate on the Jolly Rancher, but Tootsie Rolls? What happened to you?
Just have never liked them. It's a free country. It's a free country.
Sure. Well, you started to find. Oh, I thought you had better.
Candy corn. I think we can come to a consensus on candy corn.
Yeah, I just assumed you had better taste. Is all I'm saying. Literally, I mean, quite literally. Final question about the Halloween thing. Kids dressing up? They heading out?
They are, but they're going to be bundled up.
Yeah, so
this is ridiculous. last year at this time it was 73 degrees, and I think it's 23 degrees right now.
Yeah, and I did hear Schmassy say, but there's not going to be any wind, so we do have that going for us. Take the small wins that we can get.
That's true, and it is only October 31st, so
it's only going to get worse. Jason Matthews is a political science instructor out of Bismarck State College, Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, and we used to do a podcast. What the hell happened this week? And there's been many weeks since you and I have had a chance to visit. There's been a lot to catch up on it, and I just was kind of teasing as we're trying to work through our technical difficulties here on some of that. So I guess, where do you begin? I think we got to start probably with the Speaker of the House and, the whole turmoil that happened over the last several weeks. To finally get a guy named, I'm curious your reaction to it, just as what it meant for the Republican Party before we get into the presidential election here.
What it meant for the Republican Party was it confirmed what I think most of us have known all along, that this is far and away no longer Ronald Reagan's Republican Party. This is very much the party of Donald Trump. And the opposition that was leveled against Jim Jordan, who was put forward as, I think it was the second nominee of the House Republican Conference, was he was far too conservative and too much of a lightning rod. And so they picked the most bland individual. It was like picking a name out of the phone book, Mike Johnson, as Speaker of the House. And when you take a look at his record, you see this is someone who, in terms of his position on a number of issues, he's a movement conservative, cultural conservative. He's out of the mainstream of American thought.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He is going to be that if the Democrats are competent, and there's always the big if there, but he is going to be the focus of targeted ads in those suburban districts across the United States where the House is going to be decided. But he's very much within the mainstream of the Republican Party. And that shows where the party is right now. This is a party that since 1988, the end of the Reagan era, has defined itself by a negative agenda, more negative agenda than positive agenda. It defines itself by what it is against. And it's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out. He is untested. He's not familiar to the American people. The Democrats have an opportunity to really define him. He is also the first speaker since the 1800s, second half of the 1800s, to have not previously chaired a committee or served in a leadership position. He has a steep learning curve, and he is managing a caucus, a Republican caucus that is very divided, and it's very fractured. And he is doing this with a very dominant figure in Donald Trump who hovers over everything.
So, was this just the last, hey, we're throwing it at the wall, hope it sticks because, hey, we got so much egg on our face right now? Because you just mentioned that Jim Jordan was one of those that was so pushed back against in that same caucus because he's too far as an extremist, and then they still settle for somebody. Or was it just another example of moderates caving?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, quite frankly, you had Tom Emmer, and Tom Emmer is out of Minnesota. He's the House Republican whip. He is the textbook Rotarian Republican in every respect. But what happened to him was he was blasted. He was, had the scarlet letter put on him by Matt Gaetz and others because he voted to certify Joe Biden's election as president on January 6th. So that became the litmus test. And there were many moderates in the Republican Party, Ken Buck from Colorado being among them, says, I just can't vote for anybody who didn't certify Biden's election. And then he turns around, sabotages, torpedoes, I should say, Jim Jordan's candidacy. And then he turns around and he votes for Mike Johnson. I think that exhaustion certainly set in with a lot of them. And also, Mike Johnson just has a pretty bland personality. I mean, he's an unknown quantity. And I think that is the danger for the Republicans. And I think that's something that they may very well a year from now come to regret because of the way in which the Democrats are already going after him. And the Democrats have a playbook to use. The Republicans used it very effectively against Nancy Pelosi for all those years that she was the face of the Democratic Party in the House.
So I was saying they're going to be doing the old Nancy Pelosi treatment for anybody running on that side of the aisle, whether you're running for a city commission or if you're running, in fact, for a partisan office. Jason, you got more time for me? We got to talk about Joe Biden's abysmal poll numbers, what that means.
Yes.
There's a lot of listeners that have been waiting for that conversation to come up saying, Tyler, I told you so. This is a common text I'll get every day here. I could be talking about sports. I could be talking about concerts. It doesn't matter. There's people that are eager that always want to keep on saying Joe Biden, Joe Biden, Joe Biden. Abysmal polling, open borders, economy's in shambles. Poll numbers, at least, of all the things that they want to throw as far as being a weak spot. I mean, right now it does show his unfavorability quite high. And you've got an incumbent that we're looking at about a year to turn it around. I mean, I get it. A lot can happen in a year, but what's the landscape view right now of Joe Biden when it comes to just people's not liking the guy, or at least liking the job he's done?
I think he's probably in the toughest shape of any incumbent going into re-election since Jimmy Carter.
Oh, and we know the outcome of there.
And we know what happened there. And there's a disconnect there in a lot of respects. I have a theory on it. There are several theories that others bring out. I have a theory on it, but I'll get to that in a moment. The issue that Joe Biden faces is the very simple fact that he can't change how old he is. And he is 80 years old and he looks 80, and he's going to be 81 next month. And that is a major concern on the part of the voters. And he just can't shake that. The only choice that the Democrats have is that they have to lean in to the age and try to turn that into an advantage when it comes to, stability, experience, and the like. But I think the problem that you have is when you take a look at the numbers on the economy is roaring. If you take a look at the numbers, inflation is down. People are spending money. Just a report came out the other day from Wall Street Journal about American spending is way back up pre-COVID. And yet Americans are saying that they're struggling, that they're not getting by. The data doesn't back that up. The consumer practices don't back that up. And one of the issues that I think that is a challenge for Biden is because of his age, he is not able to go out there and get out there into the country, out there on the hustings, talking to the voters. And when he does talk, it is halting. He has a halting speech pattern. Now, he's never been a superb traditional orator like Barack Obama, but he was a very good stump speaker back in the day. And in his day as we shall say, those days are past. Mm-hmm. And so I think that from a communication standpoint, with so much of the presidency being a communicative office, that's where he really struggles.
One thing that stands out aside from, okay, the delivery isn't what it used to be. None of us are as good as we once were, right? But if I don't know that there's anything that can be done when you have data, when you've got the numbers and figures going the opposite way of what people actually feel, right? And you know that politics is about feeling. It's about, it's capturing on a narrative as well. The narrative's out there that the economy is bad. And I don't know that there's anything. I mean, we can run around and talk about GDP. We can talk about unemployment numbers being, far below what anybody projected here. But if it's not resonating, what good does that do as far as a reelection strategy?
And perception's reality. And let's just come right out and say it. 40%, 45% of the country turns on a cable news channel every day that is talking about how bad everything is. It's apocalypse now in major cities across the country. Hordes are crossing the border, coming in and filling your cities with drugs. I mean, it's selling. It's that angertainment. And that is something that, Democrats, any incumbent Republican, any incumbent president, Democrat or Republican, can't change. I mean, that's just the way it is. So it's shaping a narrative that's out there where people will come out and say, I'm really struggling. You take a look at their spending patterns. It doesn't bear out, but they think that the rest of the country is going to hell in a handbasket.
I'm going to talk about the other side of this equation when I come back after KFGO News about there's polling showing exactly where we expected it to be, unfortunately. And if I'm watching and I'm Doug Burgum saying, what's a guy got to do? So, Jason, you stick around. I got more questions for you. Jason Matthews, my guest. We're talking about terrible numbers for Joe Biden. And the fact is, here, we didn't get to this. Any motivation? I mean, is there any motivation for Democratic voters to turn out?
The difference between the political parties has always been, for the last 50 years, 60 years of American politics, is that Republicans fall in line, Democrats fall in love. Democrats have to feel it.
Are they?
and they're not. And the problem for the Democrats is that Biden, and I don't have the answer to this, but Biden was always consistently throughout the Trump years seen as the one Democrat who could beat Donald Trump. And you and I saw that firsthand. You heard people say, I can't vote for any of these other Democrats, but I could vote for Joe Biden. Well, why is that? All right. But he did. He was able to defeat Trump. The danger, though, and the warning for the Democrats is that consistently throughout the 2020 cycle, going back to when you started polling in 2018, Joe Biden consistently had about a 3 to 5 point lead over Donald Trump. And he ended up winning by less than that. Mm-hmm. And right now he is behind Donald Trump, who has 91 criminal charges against him in four different jurisdictions. All right. Or 3 different jurisdictions. And yet he's behind Trump by about 3% on average, 2 to 3%. And the one thing we know about Trump is Trump always beats the numbers. He always overperforms. And that's what should give Democrats pause.
Well, and you got the Chads of the world that, hey, look, I don't care about the 91 felonies. This is a witch hunt. And I mean, he's effectively turned this into hey, I'm doing this for you. And it's stuck for people like the Chads of the world out there that will do anything for this guy. So, I mean, the motivation's there. They want to turn out and vote for him, being Donald Trump, where the Democrats don't have that. So let's talk about the Republican side of this, because you've got other candidates in this race, not as many as you had, say, on Sunday. Mike Pence dropping out, and people are looking at others that don't have a shot that are still holding on. Someone like Doug Burgum, who New York Times just had an article saying, well, he's got money, but that's about it. But he's going to hang on because of, the whole Iowa, New Hampshire. He wants to go through there because he's got it made up in his mind that those voters will decide. Well, I think, that's an argument to be made, but the voters, I think, are making it abundantly clear that right now you haven't done enough to get them into your camp. So when it comes to the Republican side, I mean, Trump by far the front runner. I mean, there's no disputing that. Motivation's there from his base, which is a large portion. He talked about the fact that the speakership shows that it's his party now, and we already knew that. I mean, it's clear cut that this is likely going to be the rematch of 2020, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a majority of Americans don't want that rematch. And that is where Americans, they're going to have some other choices too. I mean, you've got RFK Jr., and I'm on the record saying I think he's a crackpot, but he's running as an independent. You've got Cornel West, who's going to run as this independent progressive. There's a lot of anger on the far left about Biden's handling of the Israel-Hamas conflict. And they're, and the far left is always angry about something, like the far right. So there'll be an option there. And I've always said that the real danger for Joe Biden is that voters just stay home. They just, a country of 330 million plus people, and the best that we can do, average voter sentiment here is that we are going to have a rematch between an 81-year-old and a 78-year-old. That's the best that we can do. I will say this, though, about Donald Trump. There's a lot of focus, and I think justifiably so, about Joe Biden's age. Let's not forget the fact that next year, Donald Trump's going to be 78. And Donald Trump always seemed, this is just from an optical standpoint, always seemed to be the guy that doesn't age. I think that you're seeing he is making more gaffes when he goes out there on the campaign trail than he has in the past. And I think that the weight of his legal problems is starting to weigh on him. I don't think there's enough coverage of that.
Nikki Haley's name keeps getting brought up because she's moving up into that second spot, albeit a very distant second spot in the Republican primary. This is where you have people that are longtime Republicans that don't want Donald Trump being their candidate again, saying people like Doug Burgum just need to come to reality and get out of this thing. He says no. You have others, Vivek Ramaswamy, that had his flash in the pan moment, and he's kind of fallen. Ron DeSantis is kind of falling, not as rapidly as he was earlier. I mean, even if they get out of the race, there's no guarantee that, their base goes to a Nikki Haley either.
Mm-mm. No, I mean, Ramaswamy's clearly playing for getting a cable news show on Newsmax or on Fox News. Doug Burgum, his candidacy is proof positive that the rules don't apply to candidates who can self-finance. I mean, the New York Times story today said that he has spent $12.9 million so far. That's more than the campaigns of Haley, Christie, and Mike Pence combined. And a third of that was spent on television advertising alone. I mean, this guy has the money. And I've always said that I think that the Burgum strategy is to surprise in Iowa. I was on your show earlier this summer. I said that I think he's playing for a third place finish in Iowa. And I think the rules just don't apply to him. Mike Pence was not getting any donations. Tim Scott's donations have dried up. All Doug Burgum has to do is write a check.
Yeah, I remember clearly the conversation we had last time, because I asked you, hey, how'd that work out for Michael Bloomberg? In fact, I think Eric was kind enough to put that into a promo. I don't know if it made the airways. But yes, I recall that being a part of the conversation here, that the guy can self-finance. But at what point does this just look like a vanity trip that he's going out there, saying, yep, hey, look, I got some ads playing in New Hampshire, when you're not moving numbers at all is the thing. That's why, I mean, you can stay in, and then even if you come in third or fourth in Iowa, there's still not enough momentum to stay in this thing. So I don't understand why, when he can see as clear as day that the long shot to even get into second place, then you look at that gap between second and where Donald Trump is right now. I mean, it's just not achievable. I just don't see it. There's not a path.
Well, let's get to Nikki Haley here for a moment, because I think there's something that people need to take into account. And that is that New Hampshire independents have a big say in New Hampshire, and there is no Democratic primary. There's going to be a primary, but it's not a sanctioned primary by the Democrats, because they opted to skip New Hampshire, make South Carolina the first official delegate producing primary of the season. So independents have an opportunity to vote in the New Hampshire primary. And Nikki Haley, I think, and the argument is being made by others, most notably Mike Murphy, a former Republican strategist, and others, that she is best positioned to be the alternative to Trump. And there is some validity to that, because the world situation, I think, is playing to her strength. She's had two very strong debate performances. She's a former UN ambassador. She's a proven fundraiser. She's a very articulate and compelling presence on the campaign trail. That plays to that. And if something were to happen, who had a Middle Eastern war on their bingo card for this year?
Mm-hmm.
God only knows what's going to happen next year. If something were to happen where Trump were not able to become the nominee, she's the likely fallback, and that's the worst case scenario for the Democrats, because she could easily, run the boards and win the presidency against Biden. But in New Hampshire, getting to New Hampshire, expectations are so high for Trump. They're going to be looking at the margins, and if Nikki Haley can peel off independents and make it a closer than expected outcome, then it's going to be an interesting dynamic moving forward. I still think it's very, very, very difficult to beat Donald Trump, but you never say never.
35270. Messages coming in for you, Jason. Give me about 10 more minutes of your time. All right, Jason Matthews, my guest, political science instructor, Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. I'm going to go right to the text club, Jason. There are a number of messages in here wanting your comments on. Tyler, mind-blowing that Trump is a contender with the indictments in addition to lying, bullying, lacks all morality, and bankrupt at least 7 times. It's unbelievable how anyone can support him. Truly a definition of a cult. They believe him over all the facts. I don't know that there's really a question in there for you. Just more of a comment that I'll share with you. Tyler, the Democratic nominee is going to be Newsom. He's already making overseas trips and meeting with leaders. Your response to that, because I've heard that a lot, saying, hey, look, Joe Biden will not be the Democratic nominee. Is there any legs to that at all, in your opinion?
Democrats are not going to nominate the governor of California.
Dean Phillips?
Doug Burgum has a better chance of winning the Republican nomination.
Okay. You want to go on? I can stay out of the way before I get to other messages.
Nope.
No. Okay.
Leave it at that.
Tyler, is Burgum running for vice president with his spending, knowing full well Trump is going to get the nomination? I can't believe that we are going to have to choose between Biden and Trump. Both suck. Your response?
Well, on Burgum, all I can say is I think that Doug Burgum, he's a very smart man. I think he's playing a long game here. He's getting his name out there, and I think I don't see him being on the vice presidential slot, maybe in a cabinet post, but I think he's positioning himself to have a say in public national policy moving forward.
You think he's going to get like Department of Ag or anything? Because he doesn't strike me as a person that would want something like that. He wants to be the guy in the room.
Yeah,
that's just my perception.
He's a CEO. He's a CEO. I mean, his name's gonna be bandied about for that. But I think that Doug Burgum has a voice, and he's making his voice heard now, and this is a platform for him. And I think that with his money after the governorship and after this presidential race, he can afford to be a voice in public policy, whatever that would be, in terms of AI or energy moving forward.
Another question coming in. Tyler, so you're saying legacy media and all Democratic-leaning organizations' goal is to keep Trump in the race, because if he was out of the race, Nikki Haley would beat Joe Biden in a race. I don't think that I heard anything about legacy media, but here's the biggest fear Democrats have is not losing to a Republican, it's losing to Donald Trump, is the impression I get from those that I always hear. Because, I mean, we still have our connections out in the Beltway, so to speak, not in media, but those backroom chats that happen between Democrats and Republicans that still get along, that's the biggest fear. It's not losing to like a Nikki Haley, it's losing to just Donald Trump, right?
No, I've heard Democrats themselves say, I don't like Nikki Haley, but I wouldn't lose any sleep if she's president.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. More coming in. Tyler, I wish Gretchen Whitmer would run.
I'd like to speak to that.
Oh, you're going to actually take a swing at this one. Proud of you.
I'm going to take a swing at this one because this is an issue here. You'll notice that when you talk about Biden's successors, Kamala Harris is not in the discussion. And I think that Harris who has worse approval numbers than President Biden is a liability for him, because there is not public confidence in her ability to step in as president. And if something were to happen where Biden, says, I'm not going to run again next year, and I think that window is close to being shut and sealed for the season, there would be a free-for-all in the Democratic race. And remember, Biden said in 2020 that he wanted to be a bridge to a younger generation. So the implication there was, or it was implied, that he would be a one-term president. And when you take a look at the Democratic bench, this is the most impressive bench the Democrats have had for presidential prospects in my lifetime. I think it rivals what the Republicans had in 1980, which was one of the most impressive flock of candidates that any party put forward. You've got Pritzker in Illinois, you have Whitmer, you have Shapiro, you have Moore, you have Klobuchar. The list goes on of potential candidates. And there's just this natural assumption, well, Biden will run and then he'll win or he'll lose, and then they'll all run again in 2028. A lot will happen between now and 2028. And that bench may not very well be there in 2028. So I think that's also part of the frustration for a lot of Democrats.
A lot to digest. How about we do this a little bit more frequent? Stop being so dang busy all the time and make some time for your friends here on KFGO, because I got more messages coming in. I just don't have enough time, and I know you got to get running here. What's the final parting words from you this time?
I think that the next 2 months are going to be critical in shaping the 2024 campaign, because there's the New York civil trial, which Trump will probably lose. There's a real possibility in the federal January 6th case of the gag order, of him continuing to violate that, and he may very well be put into jail for violating that. And then I think that's what's keeping up the national security establishment at night, is the very real prospect of a regional war in the Middle East, with Iran getting even more involved in this, and it cannot not suck the United States in. So the next 2 months, I think, are perilous, not only in terms of American democracy and our reaction to the very real prospect of a former president on trial or being put into jail for violating a gag order, but the weight of the office on the incumbent president and the world situation.
Well, let's leave on such uplifting comments, don't we? It is Halloween. I guess we need to get a little spookiness in here before we get everybody out.
I've said it before. I'll say it again. These segments need to be sponsored by an antidepressant.
Next time I'll have you in to talk about Kiss and the Golden Girls, okay? We'll talk about music, and we'll talk about old 80s sitcoms. Jason, it's always a pleasure, my friend. I appreciate it. You take care, all right?
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, Jason Matthews, a friend of the show here, and a political science instructor, Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, and all the above.